Good morning. Hope you all had a beautiful night and you're not feeling too queasy, because the next 12 minutes I'm talking to you about maggots. I'm also going to talk to you a bit about river pollution, about England's new incoming mountain made entirely of food waste, and I might also talk to you about recycling as a priority over protein production. You might be thinking what that's got to do with insects, so listen in and you'll find out. I follow a rich Nuffield history now. I'm the third scholar in a row after Olivia championed George Roach to look at insect production, and we're building evidence to suggest that black soldier flies hold a solution to many of the problems here in the UK. But for me, it all started in May 2022. I was made redundant from a rags to riches and back to rags again startup in London. And I did what everyone would do when they fear for their financial security. I bought 3 shipping containers and bunged a load of insects in them. But then after that, I sat down with a spreadsheet and I costed it out. So the main input is the feedstock, which is food waste. So you can reasonably assume that it's minimal cost for the inputs. And with the protein price parity with fishmeal of about £1,500 a tonne, I thought I've got a really serious business on my hands here. I remember saying to my brother, this time next year, Rodney, we're going to be millionaires. But in reality, we were only fools and larvae. In reality, the feedstock cost is never really zero, in this country at least. The factory yields aren't as strong as what you put into the spreadsheet. The supply chain has its deficiencies, with it being a very nascent industry. There's regulatory constraints all over the place, and the demand is untested. In fact, many insect factories, particularly in Europe, they sell their protein into pet food industry, where they can get a higher margin for their product, but ultimately the demand is limited. And so it would have been easy for me to call it a failed experiment, but the idea of turning waste into value was too powerful for me to ignore. So if I couldn't make it work here for the time being, then perhaps it is working somewhere else, and I was desperate to see that. So I packed my bags and I visited 50 businesses in 14 countries across 4 continents. And the first stop in Europe, where they have insect mega factories, robotically controlled, vertically farmed, very shiny, but what I realized was that they're not working. And for those reasons I told you before, but mainly it was down to a process engineering problem and someone told me that they invested in the technology before they understood the biology of the insect. And that stuck with me, and it made me even more determined on the rest of my travels to find places which had the technology, the biology, and the economics working in perfect harmony. And so that took me to Canada. This here is Luis Ortiz of Infinity Harvest Technologies. And he told me firstly that insect businesses can be either an input focus or an output focus, but rarely or very complicated to do both. What he does in Ontario, where there is lots of food production but not so much waste processing other than traditional forms like landfill, people will pay him to take their food waste. So that simple change, turning an input from a cost to a revenue, means that his now business goes from a loss to a profit. And that was the first clue, that the value doesn't necessarily come from where it leaves the system, but where it might enter the system as well, in this industry at least. The second example I want to share with you is a company in East Africa called Chanzi, where they take unit economics extremely seriously. They've got huge fly rooms, as you can see on the left-hand picture at the top, and they have, rather than small cages, they have self-harvesting larvae, they have free energy from the sun and cheap, readily available local labour. They even joke that they want to charge the flies rent. You can see from the cost model here, compared to the European counterparts, just how much that shaves off the cost. And even with lower revenues, they can make a profit. It did also make me think that if insect protein is going to be a commodity in the future, it's going to be very difficult to compete with the likes of Chanzi in East Africa. The third example I want to share with you is a company called Marula Protein, who, again, based in East Africa, very similar cost structure to Chanzi, the previous example. But the difference is that they are based in the coffee production areas in the hills, where the larvae, the protein is not in as much demand. But the frass, the insect poo, is as a fertilizer. So what they do, they take the coffee pulp, which is very wet waste, feed it to the larvae. Once they're finished eating, they compost the larvae into the frass. They then, which adds more nutrition, and they then take that frass, give it back to the coffee farmers or sell it to them, which produces more beans for next season, more pulp for the black soldier flies, for more frass, and the cycle goes on. It's a true circular economy model. And it made me think this time, are they selling a product or are they selling a service to the coffee industry? Quite an interesting distinction. And so after 4 months of intensive travel, my partner Katie and I decided to take a rest on Hotel Kilimanjaro with world-class service, Michelin-star food, a great place to work on my tan, and a lot of time to ponder. I realized that the successful setups in this space, they all have two similarities. They fit the ecosystem around them, and they prioritize waste management over everything else. So we got to the top, and I spontaneously proposed to Katie, hoping that the altitude would cloud her judgment. It did, and she said yes. So we got to the bottom, flew home, fully renovated our house, and along came Fred, the joy of our lives. And it was at that point where I really thought I should focus on the business and get it working. So here in the UK, I think we've got two opportunities. Firstly, river pollution. I told you I'd talk about it. Take the River Wye, which is under an immense amount of pressure from nutrient runoff supposedly caused by sewage spills and chicken manure. What if we could put a black soldier fly farm in the area of the River Wye, and it can process the chicken manure? For every 10 tons of manure you put in just 10 days, you'll get 2 tons of insects and 2 tons of frass. That's a 60% reduction in that short space of time. That frass is extremely dry and stable, great for spreading on land or for transporting out of the area to places which need it more, such as east of England. So imagine solving river pollution and nutrient redistribution in one hit. The second opportunity, new regulations, the simply recycling regulations in the UK, mean that councils and businesses now have to separate out their food waste. A good idea, in my opinion. It would be a better idea if we could deal with this huge mountain of food waste. Current AD infrastructure or capability in the UK can process about 25% of UK organics. So clearly, we need more opportunities and tools to deal with this, and insects could be one of them, and it's worth exploring. So we have the raw material, and I've talked to you about the markets. What about the permission? And that it really is the blocker. So insects are classified in the UK as a farm livestock, the same as poultry or cows or other livestock. So that means you can't feed them manure or food waste, even if you don't use the insects back into the food chain, which seems a bit bizarre, really. So I announce to you all here that the circular economy is hereby cancelled, unless you follow my 3-point plan to scaling the industry. We need to change perception. For too long, we've been calling this insect a sustainable protein, and we need to start calling it a waste processing powerhouse. And through my blogging and my new podcast, the Black Soldier Fly Leaders podcast, which I think everyone in here should listen to on their long journeys home, I'm trying to guide people in the right direction. We need regulatory change, and we need nuance to the animal byproducts regulations, and through possibly the most niche interest group, the Nuffield insect group, we are lobbying policymakers and politicians. In fact, we had a meeting with Robbie Moore last night. We need better process engineering and to learn from the high capex facilities in Europe and simplify the process. And my business, Fly to Feed, with the help of Innovate UK grants, is looking to do exactly that. And so before my final remarks, I'd like to thank Nuffield, my partner, Katie, who travelled with me the entire time and supports me continuously, and Alan and Anne Beckett. Sadly, Alan passed away 2 months after giving me my scholarship, and I just only hope that I've done him proud. So, to close the loop on my presentation, we've heard from Olivia and George and now myself, and I pass the baton on to Sinead Davis, who is the daughter of a poultry farmer in the River Wye catchment, looking at insects processing poultry manure, and she's an environmental barrister, so she might know a thing or two about changing the regulations. But what does pressure make? Diamonds. So if you were to leave here with one thing and one thing only today, let it be this. We are sitting on a circular economy powerhouse, an opportunity here to solve all of these problems and more in the UK. I've told you my plan, but I can't do it on my own, and I need the help of everyone here, British agriculture, to scale this industry and make this happen. Thank you very much.